Good morning again, everybody, or again to those that are on the previous session. For those that are joining us for the first time today, just good morning. Thank you for joining us on the second of our sessions here on Cloud Security Week with BYTES. Today, Microsoft Security Solutions on this particular session. So what are we here for this week? It's really hard for me, just as an aside, because I'm delivering this same presentation basically 4 or 5 times over today and tomorrow, to not rapidly speed up. I apologize to that. It's striking the balance between those of you that have already seen this once and those of you that this is all new to. But we're running Cloud Security Week this week. We have 9 sessions across the 3 days. And we have a series of industry-leading vendors and experts who are here to present to you and to provide you some insight and to pose you some questions. Today is all about cloud fundamentals. Tomorrow I'll be moving into some public cloud sessions and then cloud applications on day 3 rather. Quick little bit of housekeeping. So most of us are probably at home. I know all of our presenters here today are, or on this session are. So your fire exit is, well, it's your house, so you know where it is. There will be polls and questions throughout. Please do use the Q&A. The question box, I believe, is on the very right-hand side of your screen near the poll. So please use it and interact with us. All the sessions will be recorded, and there is a £100 voucher available for feedback as a draw for providing feedback to us. The feedback is very, very important, because without the feedback, we can't improve these sessions. So please do utilise the feedback features to let us know. Quick introduction to BYTES. For those of you that don't know me, my name is David Rawle. I'm the Group CTO here at BYTES. I've been here a while. We've also got Nick Lines with us today from Microsoft and Ali Turnbull here from Microsoft. So they will be introducing themselves and going through their bit in a little bit. BYTES, and specifically the security division within BYTES, 65 people, around £100 million turnover, is an amalgamation of the pure play security business that was BYTES Security Partnerships. That was merged into BYTES Software Services on the 1st of March 2020. We thought it was a really good idea to integrate 2 businesses together and completely change the way we operated 23 days before the start of the first lockdown. If only we'd had a crystal ball. But actually, it's gone fairly well. And I think from a customer point of view, we're delivering something a little bit special here in the UK in terms of what other resellers are offering. Let's give you a quick timeline just to show you the kind of way that it has gone for us. Security Partnerships, as it then was formed in 1999. I actually joined that business on the 17th of January 2000. So I've been doing this a while. We were bought by BYTES on the 1st of August 2011 and integrated into the main BYTES business on the 1st of March 2020, as I mentioned. I mean, I've been very, very lucky. I think there's very few of us in this industry who have been lifers with one business. But I've been very lucky in that the business has grown and everything I've been involved in has kind of grown at the same pace I've grown. I think it's probably the best way of phrasing it. So I've been lucky in that respect. The security business, I'll talk you through. Really, I already mentioned, I think it's a little bit special here in the UK. I'll talk about why. So BYTES Software Services is a long-standing, effectively software reseller. Very, very strong pedigree and track record in licensing and procurement. Obviously, this session is exclusively a Microsoft session and has been there or thereabouts as a top partner for Microsoft over the last 20-25 years. And probably longer. Nick will be able to correct me on that, I expect. I lose track of the exact number of years, but certainly for a long time. And BYTES has always been known for a very strong pedigree in licensing and procurement and being able to facilitate that for our customers. What we're possibly not as well known as is our services and the areas of technical expertise we have. But particularly with the integration of the security business, we do actually have an awful lot of services to offer to our customers and a genuine level of technical expertise. So we have a 24/7 support desk covering the security areas, but also our software asset management and Microsoft business. We have implementation and professional services across the Microsoft and security areas. We also have full managed security, so SOC, NOC, managed firewalls, managed SIEM, managed IPS. And we also have our cyber consulting business. The cyber consulting business is a full PCI QSA. It's an ISF audit practice. It's a pen testing practice, and it can do forensic investigation and incident response, which is probably the area that has grown the most since really the start of we call it the current world. I won't call it the new world anymore. It was the new world a year ago. It's now the current world, because it has gone mad in that respect, and customers and businesses just need help with that. So it is really all encompassing from a security point of view, and it is quite a special offering in terms of a one-stop shop and you being able to work with us on that. Today, this session and what Nick and Ali are going to be talking about is the Microsoft security stack and Microsoft security solutions. And I think it's fair to say, for all of us that have been in the industry for a while, it's where I get the laser eyes from the other people that you guys can't currently see, that there was a time that Microsoft and security were not synonymous with each other. I think that's fair to say. You go back 2004, 2006, you know, there were issues, but Microsoft changed, and Microsoft completely changed the way that they did their development, the way that their coding cycles worked. They then moved to a service-based model rather than a simple software licensing model. You know, I know practically nobody who goes out and buys a copy of Office or buys a copy of Windows these days. They are provided on a subscription basis. And it's a very different model. It's a service-based model. And with that comes a responsibility for securing that and providing the native toolkits to allow that subscription to be utilized in a secure way. And the one thing I really do think, oh, somebody clicked me. The one thing I really do think is that Microsoft has stepped up to the plate on that. So what I'm going to do without further ado is check in first on the poll, which for those of you on the last session, also I forgot that time as well, just to make sure all the polls were working. So you should have a poll around somewhere about coffee. I'm now done with coffee for the day, so I've now changed my response to I've had enough. So if you can just all click on that, make sure it's working, make sure you're happy with it. And it also enables us to check what's going on at the back end. And that will then flick over in sort of the next 30 seconds to a poll that will sit there during the first session about which of the following answers best fit your organization. That'll be something that I can talk to Nick about after his presentation. So without further ado, I think I just about recovered that. I'll hand over to Nick to go through his slides. Nick, are you there?
I am indeed, yes, and thanks for the handover,
Excellent.
David.
No worries.
Interesting that you mentioned the change in Microsoft. I completely agree with you. I mean, if you look back at, I think it was January 2003 was when SQL Slammer hit the world, which was a very interesting time for us all. And as a result of that, you know, 300 odd byte packet that could take down SQL servers and cause, well, basically cause a huge issue with a distributed denial of service against any SQL server on the internet. Yeah, it changed the way Microsoft thinks. As a result of that, then all coders down tools. There was a mandatory training on security for 3 months. Again, there was a lot of talk about buffer overflow on there. But as a result of that, we moved into this idea of the secure development lifecycle, which is now, since 2003, been infused in the way Microsoft works. So yeah, it has changed the way we work. It really has. And that's what I wanted to do really today was give a bit of a challenge to make people think again about what they think of Microsoft when it comes to security. I'm just trying to move a window around here, which is why you look at me slightly gone out. So yeah, I want to start with something quite contentious. You know, let's start a debate on this one. But Microsoft is a security company. Arguably, we are the security company. I say that because we authenticate 30 billion transactions across 500 million AD users worldwide. And that sounds all right. You know, 30 billion transactions, okay, that's quite impressive, but that's a day. So it is a big number of transactions happening every day. We blocked 30 billion email threats last year using Defender for Office 365. Again, 30 billion a year, another big number. 400,000 customers trust us to provide a secure platform for them to work on, and this number is growing. It's not just carrying on doing the same thing as well with those numbers. It's transforming the way people work. 50% of organizations, according to Gartner's research, will be using managed detection and response services by 2025. So this is a real question for me, and it's an observation on the way the market's going. And again, I challenge the audience for, how are you thinking about this? How are you bringing security in-house? And how are you looking to say, where should you outsource your security? Is it your job to run security, or should you be working with partners to actually get on doing with what you do and leave the security to someone else? Second question is, do you know where your data is? And we saw over half of the respondents in a recent survey tell us that even with GDPR and even with the past years of dedication and focus on trying to understand where data is, people still don't understand where it is. And again, this is a big concern for people. Some good news though, despite the recent pandemic or the current normal, I think is David's phrase for that one, over half of the organizations that we surveyed have a resilience plan that adequately prepared them for their COVID response. I mean, for me, I'm genuinely surprised by this. I find this incredible, especially given the number of times the word unprecedented has been used recently. And I think we're all hoping that very soon now we can get back to this idea of precedented times. But it also means that there's under half of people thinking, okay, how do we learn from this? So Microsoft has been investing over $1 billion in security research and development annually. And that's not just last year, that's been the past few years. I've been saying that for around 5 years now. And we are a security company and growing fast. For the first time in our most recent earnings call, our CEO, Satya Nadella, called out that not only earnings, but also that our growth in security was 40% year on year. We're seeing massive amounts of interest in Azure Sentinel in particular, along with Microsoft E5 security. But this is also turning into requirements and interest around compliance. And in a similar way, we've seen threat protection conversations lead to interest in network security with Microsoft. So that's really where Microsoft is right now. But what about the bigger picture? With the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing an acceleration of two existing secular trends that only really intensifies everything we're doing with security. Number one, we've seen a big shift from January 2019 to remote everything. We've seen people go from 22% of respondents saying their workforce is remote to 89% of people are saying that their workforce is now remote. And interestingly, they project that 42% of their workforce will continue to be remote a year from now. So this isn't just the new norm. This has actually changed the way people work and changed the way people want to work. Secondly, on the operational resilience side of things, again, I mentioned it before, only 54% of CISOs indicated their resilience plans had prepared them adequately from pandemic. And we do see this as a real drive to need more solutions for not only collaborating remotely and working in the new way, but also securing that new way. And we put out a survey last August, which is probably interesting for people on the call, which looked to see how people had responded to the pandemic. And there was a load of organizations, more than half, had spent more on security as a result. There is now a scrambling to try and get back in control of that spend, to say, actually, what's the risk I'm protecting? Am I protecting against the right risk still? What is going on in my network? What is going on as a result of the changing way people are working? And how do I secure that? And it also comes in the shape of an evolving threat landscape. So clicking through, and I just need to make sure I'm on the right piece here, because I think we're slightly behind on the clicker. No, we're right on that one. So what's happening with the threat landscape is we're seeing a massive change in the way cyber criminals are responding. So yes, we've become more agile. Yes, we respond to new ways of working. As with any disruption, someone is going to take that as a chance to leap on that confusion, leap on the slight nervousness and insecurity in people's minds of what they're doing, and try and use it to their advantage. And we are seeing cybercrime following the issues of the day, as said here. We released our digital defense report, which is you can find at aka.ms, that's aka.ms/SIR. That gives you a load of insight into what's been going on and the sort of things that we've been seeing recently, and certainly post-pandemic or during the pandemic. We're seeing groups really become adept at evolving their technique to increase success rates by using different phishing laws and adjusting the types of attack they execute, or finding new ways to hide their work as well. I mean, look at what happened with SolariGate and how long a world-leading security company had an issue in their own internal processes. Again, that's not having a pop at anyone involved. It just really is showing the tradecraft of people that were involved in that. Again, with over 1,000 developer signatures found in the code base alone. They're moving quickly anyhow to discover new threat vectors, use new exploits, and respond to these new defenses. We're still seeing a lack of basic security hygiene as well in the ecosystem, and it gives people the chance to get in and use well-known vulnerabilities to exploit environments. And we're still seeing really phishing going through as the most important thing, or the most prevalent way to try and attack people. And they're trying to get identities, because once you get the identity, you start your lateral movement. This isn't the time to do a full kill chain analysis, but I'm sure you know it as well as I do. Point is, lose an identity, you've got a problem on this one, and we'll come back to that in a couple of seconds. On these graphs, you can see instances where, malware encounters of really being tied back to a particular event. So, and people are going regional with this as well. So you can see lockdown in the US and bans in the US led to a massive increase in COVID-related phishing. Again, look at South Korea. It's a different story there, different timeline, but using the same techniques. So I'm going to change gears slightly here now, and I wanted to spend a little time setting context on how Microsoft considers security, compliance, and identity. And starting off with a natural link from the previous, I think, is looking at security trends. And what are we seeing in terms of what's happening? Well, I'll build this out just quickly. What we're seeing happening here is everything is very much on the up. Threats are up, as I've mentioned there, in an ever-increasing volume and sophistication. We've now got vulnerabilities making headline news, making, daily news on the BBC. We've got supply chain attacks being talked about on daytime TV and in the American Senate, not in specialist newspapers or specialist publications. This is on daily news on the BBC. We've got Kevin Mitnick talking about how SolariGate came to happen. Threats are up and they're not going away. Similarly, as I've mentioned, the number of solutions available in the marketplace has been on the increase all the time, and many organizations have been going to market to patch their latest security fear. The number of connected devices that people are using, especially in the pandemic, is just going through the roof, and we're seeing a proliferation of new appliances as well to monitor the changing threat landscape and address these potential vulnerabilities. The world's now got more dedicated security vendors than ever before, and given the increasing focus being made in this area, we're also seeing costs going up and increasing year on year, putting budget under immense pressure. We see organizations typically using between 30 and 80 security vendors, and frankly, that's unmanageable. And if you look at the consequences of this, you'll start to see the sort of things that are coming out as a result. So we see complexity increasing. We see organizations, systems, and defenses just becoming this vast sprawl. And for me, one of the real learnings over the past few years is complexity is absolutely the enemy of security in any way possible. So this is all requiring monitoring, ongoing support, and it's trying to draw on limited resources. I'd love to know actually what proportion of high priority alerts you and your organizations are able to actually respond to within your SLA, whether it's minutes, whether it's hours, or even days. The pressure on IT and SecOps right now is relentless. And perhaps given with the nature of what we're dealing with here, it'd be no surprise that some organizations are seeing security and the security function itself, whether that's part of IT or separated out, is now less as a business enabler and more as a cause of friction and pushback, especially as organizations are trying to transform, which often leads to people seeking workarounds. And again, that whole point of complexity being the enemy of security, if people are having to work around your security, they're trying to avoid an obstacle that's getting in the way of getting their job done. Now, in dealing with all organizations worldwide and the CISOs that we talk to, we believe that there's a tipping point of sorts that's been reached. These pressures, these problems, these consequences are common. And so is the call and expectation that there should really be a better way here. And again, from our conversations with CISOs around the world, we've identified these wants or desires. And what we're seeing build out here is these needs, these objectives that all converge and feed in to help organizations deliver improved security, but most importantly, deliver improved security in a more streamlined, coherent, and cost-effective way. You know, we can best point all these wants in this simple diagram I've put up there. And if we focus our attention on the three most common wants that we hear about, this idea of consolidation, integration, and automation, they're all represented here as three equal parts of the diagram, but in the real world, they're not always equal, and some will take precedence over others, and in some situations, there'll be other wants as well. But these are the most common things that we're hearing, and it's not just us hearing this as well. You know, we speak with analysts a lot, and the analysts are telling us the same thing. It's this idea of consolidation in particular, this simplification of security, this integration and automation, and this is where we as Microsoft are coming from. You know, I see consolidation as the primary overarching driver on this. If you achieve that, integration always comes as a given. Automation should be part of that consolidation. It should lead to greater automation too. It's this sort of positive synergy and constructive knock-on effect throughout the whole thing. On the positive, though, this common situation is the reason why some organizations are moving away from these ideas of wants to actually saying these are strategic, these are must-have plans. We can't just want to get consolidation, we can't just want automation, we can't just want to have this integration. It is a strategic imperative that we do this with our security stack. So the central objective remains focused on security, supported by these three aspirational goals of seeking greater consolidation, integration, and automation wherever practical. So how do you address this? What does this mean to Microsoft? And where, frankly, Nick, are you going with this? And this is leading to the point of how Microsoft think about security now. Previously, you'd have heard a lot from us about products and about, you know, point solutions and how this, that, and the other works together with this, that, and the other. We're trying to do things in a different way. We're trying to now take a different approach to say, well, let's look at pillars of our portfolio. And these relate to the things you see on here, which I'm going to call out. I'm just going to build this out now so I'm not constantly interrupting myself. But what you can see here is the pillars, which are identity access management, threat protection, information protection, and cloud security. Of these, identity and access management, which Ali's going to go into some detail, thankfully, you know, traditionally people created perimeters to protect the enterprise. We've evolved over the years to conclude that it's actually the identity is at the core, and that's what you should be putting the pillars around. As mentioned, phishing is still the most prevalent piece there. They're trying to get identities. That's why we want to use identity as the reason to evolve to a zero trust model. Lost the chalk track there. Zero trust model. Something's gone horribly wrong with my PC. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, can still hear you, Nick.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, good stuff. And again, on this one, we're leading to requiring an end-to-end model that looks at. I'm sorry, something's gone terribly wrong here.
Would you like me to click forward for you, Nick? We can still see that slide.
Will you see the slide? Because I can't.
Yeah, we can see it. So we've still got the drawing slide up.
Yeah. Nick,
okay,
I'll click for you in the background if you want.
Leave that up for me, please. That's great. And sorry for the confusion here.
No worries.
Okay, yeah. So talking about this requires end-to-end solution across devices, apps, data, and this is where things like Azure AD conditional access are coming to be the toolkit that helps you implement zero trust strategy, managing access across Azure, modern workplace clouds, and other clouds and on-prem resources. And again, not just Microsoft resources. At the moment, we have more than 20 million users using that Azure conditional access. Threat protection, and again, Ali's going to deep dive on this, but this is where we're seeing a lot of interest in our market. We're seeing a lot of people look to Microsoft for threat protection here, and we'll cover that, so I'm going to skip over this piece. Information protection, again, why are you doing your security? Ultimately, it's to reduce risk and give you compliance, and that risk typically starts from the information you hold and the way you protect it and manage it. We could spend hours talking about information protection itself. The point here is, though, once you start tying together from identity into threat protection, into information protection, and then to cloud security, you've got a better way of managing your solution. You've got a better way of viewing a joined up way of working. And if you look at this integration and automation that comes as a result of this, this is where you can take advantage of the full visibility that integration automation gives you, and having a greater span of control over your threat landscape and your security resources. All of our products and services are built on something called the Information Security Graph, which shares threat data across each other, enabling them to correlate data and details for contextual alerts in a way that you've never seen before. So instead of having thousands of alerts, this evolves into a single incident. So you might have a single incident that started with identity, went through to endpoints, went through to information protection. That's all correlated together, and you've got one incident to deal with. So again, the point all about this is the way Microsoft views security. This is the way we want you to think about security. And if you think of two things about Microsoft, our superpowers really around this integration and automation. How do you start and how do you get towards this point that we've been talking about here? And really, for me, this is where you start to look at zero trust. Zero trust isn't something that's unique to Microsoft. It's not a new concept. And we see zero trust now. I'm just trying to make sure these slides are following through with me here. I'm not clicking too much. Perfect. That wasn't quite built out correctly. So we see zero trust as this idea of three different things. We move from assumption to explicit verification. We adopt a policy-based least privileged access model, and we design with the assumption that every element of your system can be, and indeed has been, breached. That means taking every piece of information you can use in decisioning around access. Just because someone's authenticated with a password on a device, it doesn't mean that that access is secure. Use device properties, use network properties, use behavior, use what's being accessed, use everything as the basis. And again, Ali will cover that in a little while. Least privileged, just enough rights for just enough time. This is how we run our system internally. It's how we run our services for customers. And customer lockbox is a great manifestation of this. And then finally, design with the assumption of breach. This impacts everything from, again, we started off with SQL Slammer. It starts with software engineering, networking, devices, everything. It's the way of ensuring you contain the blast radius if and when actually something does happen. So those are the key principles that we see for zero trust. Just before I hand over to Ali then, I'm going to go and quickly cover off how others see Microsoft too. So it used to be that, you know, if you're buying into the Microsoft security vision, you'd be buying into the suite vision, but you may be making a choice to say, actually, I'm not quite going for the best of breed there. I'm going for Microsoft because I believe in this vision. Now we are not only that vision do you get, we also are a leader in 5 of the magic quadrants from Gartner. And again, I provide this for you: access management, CASB, information archiving, endpoint protection, and unified endpoint management. We're up there with the best of breed. Look at the Forrester report. We have gone from 2 years ago not being on the Forrester report to jumping into this report and actually being the lead in terms of strategic ability to execute in the Forrester Wave for security analytics platforms. This is Sentinel. So again, what I would say on this is there's a real push and a real desire for Microsoft to really help our customers and take our responsibility seriously to better secure everyone who's using our technologies. Finally, before I hand over to Ali, I just wanted to quickly mention a couple of things that you should be doing right now and you should be looking at right now that people aren't aware of. And you can use these to actually help your board to understand where your risk exposures might be, where your next projects might be, and even secure funding for those projects by saying that you are not quite up with the industry standard. You should be doing this. So again, Microsoft Secure Score gives you visibility into what's going on in your Microsoft 365 environment, and Azure Score does exactly the same things for your Azure subscriptions. It tells you very simply what to go and do next. And the first thing that you should go and do, if it isn't already done, is enable multi-factor authentication. And at that point, I think we're going to a poll now, aren't we, David, if I get the order right?
Yep, so we've got a poll to discuss, actually. We've had the poll, they've been responding to the poll. Great stuff. Which of the following fits your organization was the question. We had 73 responses to it, which is great. Expanding cloud usage and hybrid cloud environment. So the options were expanding cloud usage, cloud applications, not public cloud, using public cloud, not applications, thinking about moving to public cloud, thinking about deploying cloud applications, hybrid cloud environment, or multi-cloud. So the top three were expanding cloud usage, hybrid cloud, and multi-cloud. Everything else was, shall we say, negligible. So certainly a lot of cloud in there. And obviously, we'll be talking more this afternoon, etc., about the Secure Score stuff as well. I'm not sure, Ali, if you're covering more detail, but we've certainly got more focus on it this afternoon. I think we're running well to time. I won't pick up. I'm just looking through some of the questions we've got. Do you know what? I'm going to elect to not pick them up right now. What I'll do is we'll save the time for later. And Ali, I'll hand straight over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thanks so much, everyone, so far. Just trying to get a little bit used to the controls of running one of them on our phones as opposed to running it inside the PowerPoint. So I apologize if I get a little bit out of sync with the slides as well. But just kind of building on from what Nick took everybody through already earlier this morning. So identity really is the core of our foundation from a security perspective. Identity is the new perimeter. It is the most important thing for a user, both within your business, but also from a personal perspective, that you really need to make sure that you're looking after your own identity. It really, really, really is that really most important thing to keep your identity safe. And so from a Microsoft perspective, one of the things that Nick talked about is our zero trust call is how do we make sure that the user always has access to what they need to get access to when they need to, but also with those right permissions. We're checking every single thing every single time someone accesses a piece of technology or a piece of data or an application, is making sure that every single time a user has re-authenticated each time. But we want to make that experience seamless as possible, because I think quite a while back, people used to think of security as something that was negative from a usability perspective. People used to really dislike, oh, I have to type my password in, I'm going to write it in lots of different places. Oh, I'm going to have to, be prompted every 10 minutes and it takes me 15 minutes to get into an app. And we're trying to change that experience as well to kind of make it so that the user experience is really transformed. And that's also kind of what will drive the security technology kind of going into your company. And it's not just about the security pieces and all the threats that Nick's been talking about, but it's also about those seamless user experiences and changing that to keep that really simple for you and your users, to kind of keep them productive, really, and to kind of minimize that user friction to ensure wide adoption and maximum productivity. So when we think about Azure Active Directory, the user experiences really start with our passwordless authentication to organizational resources. So the users don't really want to be able to remember a password every single time, but also we've got to think about it from an exposure perspective. We want to make sure that we're checking every single time, but that we're not bothering the user for that on a regular basis. So once your users have conveniently verified their identity and authenticated themselves, they need rapid access to those resources to remain productive. So a consistent user experience is critical, especially if you have a diverse remote workforce, which is pretty much what we all have right now. So the best way we can look to achieve that is with single sign-on, which gives your user a one-click access to all of the apps that they need without continuous sign-ins, without prompting them, without the password re-entry. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So Azure Active Directory simplifies that by providing an access portal like My Apps, which you can see up on the screen at the moment. And that aids with application discovery and launch. So users, we can, as an admin, you can customize it, but also as a user, you can customize and optimize the application launch. You can group them into different intuitive collections. And those apps can also extend to the Office portal to pair with app discovery and launch with essential productivity and user collaboration for all the Office services as well. And finally, we really want to empower the users to manage, look to manage their own identity, such as updating their own security contact information. We want them to be able to reset their password via the My Account portal. We want them to be able to manage their devices, to see what work apps they've actually got that is available to them via the company portal. And those tools will help you start to remove some of those costly help desk dependencies and help you prioritize your IT workforce. What I was going to do now is just take you through a couple of the other newer areas in identity that we've actually just released in the last couple of months. And that is around our passwordless technology that was just gone into GA at Ignite, which was about a couple of weeks ago, really. It feels like a lot longer, but I think it was just a couple of weeks ago. So I think, as I kind of mentioned before, nobody really likes passwords, but there has been a huge increase in security incidents from just a password alone. And that, 81% of hacking related breaches leverage was stolen or weak passwords. So again, it kind of comes down to that, multi-factor authentication approach and kind of, what do we do in protecting our identity around that? And then if we think about all the support costs, how much does it cost from an IT department all about those forgotten passwords? And that's really around 20% of support costs. And not to mention that the only people that really like passwords alone is actually hackers. Hackers love the fact that people don't have multi-factor authentication. That is the quickest way in. So we really want to make it as difficult as possible, but also from a user perspective, really start to kind of make sure that, it's a lot easier. So when we start to think about that with multi-factor authentication, people still don't like the fact that they have to have two things. They have to have a password and they have to have two-factor authentication. So it's great from a security perspective because it makes the hackers upset. We've got two-factor, we can check on a regular basis, but it's a little bit more complicated and difficult to use from a user's perspective. So we've released what we call Microsoft Passwordless. So the idea is to kind of, remove that attack vector for a standalone password, but give a better experience than with just passwords and multi-factor authentication. And we're starting to do this by using the Microsoft Authenticator mobile app for your two-factor authentication needs, which supports your biometrics, your fingers, Face ID, push notifications, one-time passwords, for any application that you actually configure into Azure AD. And that doesn't just have to be Microsoft tools. It could be an in-house application that you've written on-prem, that you've used application proxy to be able to change that authentication to be Azure AD. So you're really starting to kind of, change that authentication experience for the user at no extra cost as well. We've also added into there a new password manager as well. So you've got a password manager that you're able to kind of, save all your passwords in as well, but then use that from an authentication point of view, to remove that whole passwordless piece. And by building on the Windows Hello and the FIDO2 keys as well, we're able to actually access those apps without needing a password. couple of other new things that we released just recently, which I thought I would look to share with you, is that if you've lost your password, we can now register for phone sign-in. You can register a FIDO2 key in order to be able to recover access to your account. And we've also created this new technology called temporary access pass, which is a time-limited passcode that serves as strong credentials to allow the onboarding of passwordless credentials. So, we can set that to be scoped to a brand new user that's starting. You can set a duration, a time. You can have this one-time use or multi-use. So if you think about maybe temporary people coming in to do a small piece of work, we can really kind of start to control it a bit more at the user side or the management side rather than just at the admin side as well. It's configurable via the Microsoft Graph, so you could programmatically look to kind of integrate that into some of your other solutions or into the Azure AD portal, but it also satisfies that multi-factor authentication requirement too. And if you don't really know where to start, we've also built a brand new reporting insight page on our Azure AD piece, which actually tells you which users within your organization are actually capable of being able to use multi-factor authentication, and tells you how many of those are actually able that you've actually configured in your environment. So it's linking back to some of that telemetry that Nick mentioned in SecureScore, but it's also kind of looking at not just the multi-factor authentication piece, but what users in our environment would be able to use passwordless authentication. How many people can use self-service password reset? And I would hope that pretty much most users should be configured for multi-factor authentication now, and along with the self-service password resets, so you can start to kind of look at that capability of removing that two-factor authentication piece and kind of using passwordless as kind of like a double piece on top of that, and kind of building on that multi-factor authentication piece. So when we move towards threat, what I really wanted to kind of talk about is, what do we see in our threat environment? How does Microsoft kind of look at that whole threat overview, and how do we kind of sit in the marketplace, and what do we actually look at it? Well, really starting at the center, we have approached to both broaden and deepen the understanding of the entire estate. And this is driven off to kind of two central pillars. The first being the machine learning, which is driven by our unique breadth of data with comprehensive signals across the modern workplace, the cloud infrastructure, providing faster insights with greater accuracy. And then kind of looking at the, all of our world-class researchers driving to understand the new macro trends across the landscape, as well as like looking at those unique attacks and the anomalies for individual companies. And this kind of looks at, our platform in two different ways. We have our SIEM and SOAR tool at the top, which is our Azure Sentinel tool, which is our cloud native tool. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And that allows us to bring those multi-cloud connectors and all those other different third-party telemetry into a place where we can look at all of those threats in one single area. And that's kind of where we can start to kind of build partnerships with other tools and things as well. And then, to help prevent and protect what's going on in your environment, we have what we call the Microsoft Defender XDR suite. So let's drill down into that in a little bit more detail and let you know what that looks like. So from a Sentinel perspective, this is our cloud tool. It makes it easier to collect data across the hybrid organization. And using the power of AI, we can quickly identify those real threats and kind of look at that from a burden of, releasing you from the traditional SIEM. So what are the key differentiators for Azure Sentinel? So from a cloud perspective, it's very rapid deployment. It's really quick. Within minutes, you can start to ingest your first data source. So you can literally build an Azure workspace, connect a single connector in under, I think we did it in a demo test environment a couple of times in some of our training. And I think we did the whole thing in about 6 minutes, which is pretty cool. So that's, really under an hour to kind of configure that first custom query connector and to start to prove those user case scenarios. We have over 90 plus different connectors, including lots of different third-party connectors. There's not just Microsoft tools out of the box. So there's so many connectors, and we're adding more and more connectors on a regular basis. From an orchestration perspective, we use Azure Logic Apps, and some of those automations are built out the box. So you can use those to send queries to email accounts. You can process replies. We can raise and process tickets with other third-party SOAR tools such as ServiceNow. And it really kind of, focusing on the intelligence side of things as well. We've got that huge intelligence database where we're pulling in that telemetry from all our taxi environments, our Microsoft Defenders back in the background. You guys can create watch lists to look at the collection of data from external data sources. And from a reporting perspective, you can create your own custom dashboards, and you can even print those to PDF if you want. We've got lots of health monitoring. You can hook this into Power BI. But I think where it really starts to get incredibly powerful is we're able to process the massive amounts of those low-level alerts. You can bring your own algorithms, we can use downstream intelligence, and then from there we can move to that threat hunting piece, which is based around our KQL query, which is a little bit like SQL query kind of language. And we can then pivot that investigation pane. We can create reusable notebooks so that your SOC could create deep, repeatable investigation capability as well. I think the slides are a little bit out of sync here. Oh. It seems to be stuck. Sorry.
It is moving from my point of view, Ali. I can see the slides changing.
Right. Okay.
So we're on the Defender slide at the moment.
Okay. Right. I think that's where I wanted to be. Yep, sorry about that. So from a Microsoft Defender perspective, that's made up of two different halves. So we have the Microsoft 365 Defender product, which sits on everything within our Microsoft 365 platform. And then we have our Azure Defender product, which actually sits on top of our Azure platform. So those two Defender products that actually sit across our stack actually allow us to kind of create this Microsoft Defender XDR, so providing that holistic view across your entire environment. So it's something a little bit different than what other vendors do, is that we've got all of those products, kind of the telemetry all coming into one place. And if we drill down a little bit from an Azure Defender perspective, this is kind of where we start to have a look at those deep insights into the cloud workloads that we've got. So we can start to protect some of those data services, the cloud native services, service from Defender for IoT. We can look at hybrid cloud workloads. We can enable preventative protection. We've got post-breach detection, automated investigation, response for Windows servers, and that integrates with the Microsoft Defender for Endpoints product set as well. So we can enable, preventative protection, post-breach for Linux servers, detect vulnerabilities on applications in the virtual machines. We can protect AKS. We can look at the network, and we can prioritize which one of those alerts are actually, required to be moved further forward. Being able to protect those attacks. So looking at SQL injection, looking at anomalous databases, and looking at those query platforms as well. And with Azure Arc as well, we can also kind of start to protect other different machines in other clouds as well. So kind of making it sure that it's not just Microsoft tools and things that you're able to protect. We can actually protect in other clouds as well using our Azure Defender product. So when we switch back into the Microsoft Defender side of things, there we go. We can actually see what we're protecting on the Microsoft Defender side of things. So this is kind of really looking at the identities that we actually have in the environment, the endpoints, the cloud apps, and the user data as well. So what I really wanted to kind of highlight in this particular slide is that we've got, that automated cross-domain security across all of those different products, kind of allowing us to have a single portal as well. So we've redone that, portal. We used to have, quite a few different portals available out there in the from a security perspective. We've now kind of driven those into a single portal as well. I think the other area that people may or may not have been aware, that in September last year, we actually did a bit of a renaming of some of our products as well. And that really is to kind of look at the renaming of the identities product, which is Microsoft Defender for Identity. So anything that used to have the tag advanced threat protection off the back of it has actually been renamed. And I think this time, I know that we do kind of rename our products a little bit often, but this particular renaming made actually a lot more sense. environment, and hopefully it will to you guys as well. So taking away that advanced threat protection piece, naming kind of a scheme, and kind of replacing those with what they actually really mean. So Microsoft Defender for Identity is actually a product that sits on your on-premise environment, and that actually protects as your on-premise Active Directory, and actually kind of looking at the threat side of things on that particular environment. Our Endpoint product was renamed to Microsoft Defender for Endpoints. Cloud App Security remained exactly as it was. There was no change there. And our Office ATP product has been renamed Defender for Office. So that's not just protecting the emails, that's actually protecting everything in SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive as well. So what we're going to do now is kind of change tact a little bit and move towards our compliance environment. So really what I wanted to do is kind of take you through the 4 key solution areas that we have for a Microsoft compliance perspective, because it really does kind of join into that security conversation, because we've got to look at all the threats that we're actually protecting against, but we've also got to look at the data that's actually sitting on an environment, because that is the most important. That is your IP, that is your data, that is your livelihood, is all of those different types of things. So from a compliance perspective, a lot of people have different names for compliance as well. So it can have different meanings to different teams across the enterprise, but compliance is an outcome of continuous risk management. So involving the compliance, the risk, the legal, the privacy, the security, the IT, and even HR and finance teams, which kind of requires an integrated approach to manage risk. And so what we really do is we have these 4 pillars, and that pretty much starts with the base pillar, which is compliance management. So that is really looking at simplifying that risk assessment and mitigation in a more automated way, and kind of providing some of those insights by using our tools in the background that let you look at all the regulations that might be out there in the environment, and actually providing a base to see where you're actually at with all of the data and the security controls that you actually have put in place within the Microsoft platforms, and as well as also inside other third-party platforms as well. And once we start to kind of have a look at all of that, we also then, once we looked at the regulations and we know what it is that we've got to adhere to, we can start to look at the information protection and governance piece. So that's kind of protecting that data and governance wherever it lives. And then the third pillar is around our insider risk management, which is allowing us to kind of identify and take action on those critical insider risks, which I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail in a minute. And then the last piece is, how do we discover and respond when something's actually gone wrong? How do we look at all of those records? How do we look at all that data, say something's actually gone in our environment and we need to have a litigation request to respond back to an internal investigation or a regulatory request, and being able to respond to those efficiently. So from an information protection piece, really what we're doing is we're looking at, learning how to know where your data is, protect your data, put some of those prevention data loss tools in place, and then allowing you to govern those data. Unfortunately, we don't have, a huge amount of time to go into this in a little bit more detail, but I just kind of wanted to kind of cover it off at that very, very high level, is that, we have a unique approach to information and governance. So, really looking at that information lifecycle and making sure that we look at the retention and deletion policies, looking at business critical records, looking at disposition reviews, looking at policies, making sure that we have that data where the data is kind of protected where it is, and how people actually connect to it as well. So I think one of the newer tools on the block that we actually have at the moment is our insider risk management. And risk comes in many, different forms. Most customers and security and compliance teams are focused on protecting against that external threat. So an internal threat, though, is already present in every single environment, and it's really difficult to detect these companies, because the actors who create the risk also have to have legitimate access to retain access to create value for the business as well. So in order to kind of identify and separate those legitimate tasks, we've been spending quite a lot of money to kind of, put a lot of effort into our internal research and, ongoing opportunities around looking at user entity behavior analytics. How do we integrate that with Azure Sentinel, and kind of looking at all of those threats at a bigger overview. So organizations face a broad risk of users from insiders. So this is kind of where we start to kind of look at some of those scenarios where a user has to think about where they're being have to protect against. So you might have a hack, you might have some IP theft, there might be a conflict of interest like an FSI trader, but then there also might be a workplace harassment. So what we're doing is we're kind of building up our machine learning models to help to understand that natural language that people have in the environment as well. And so one of the things that I actually wanted to ask everybody, which is always kind of an interesting conversation, and one of the things before I talk about insider risk management is, have you or do you know someone who has ever taken data from a previous company with the belief that would help them in a new role? I think it's a really, really, really interesting question. And obviously, because we're on we can't really have a one-to-one conversation about this. I think what would really be good, and I think there's a poll question that's gone up in the background, is what do you think the percentage of people that actually do this is? And that's kind of what I'd like to ask the poll, and I'm hoping the poll is kind of going through in the background. So what do you think the percentage of people that take data from a previous company with the belief that would help them in a new role? Adam, are you able to share any of that? Okay, so the majority of people have come back and said it's 16 to 30%. Okay, that's quite interesting because when I've run this tool before, most people have actually kind of gone closer to the 100% actually, and thought that most people had actually taken that out. So that's quite interesting actually, because usually it doesn't come out that low. Okie dokie. Well, actually, the answer is 51%. So that's 51% of people that have actually owned up to that. So 51% of people have, involved, have kind of noted and said that they, were involved in an insider, they've taken data out of the environment before. And, a lot of those people, if you think about it, might have also had a history of violating IT policies, maybe in the lead up to them actually leaving. And I think the one thing with insider risk and the threat, that kind of comes from that is that 92% of insider threat cases were preceded by a negative work event. So such as a termination, a demotion, a dispute, maybe a furlough, all of those different types of things. And I think, with lots of people being furloughed, people at home, it's even harder than ever to kind of see what's going on in your environment, to be able to monitor. So it's really, really keen to be able to pull out those kind of that telemetry to see what's going on in the environment before the fact happens, because everyone's going to have the same type of issues, and everyone really has to look at dealing with insider risk management. So usually at this point I'd run to a live demo, but it's not able to be able to kind of go into that in a little bit more detail and show you a bit more about what the product actually does. But really what we're trying to do here is kind of bring out those rich insights. So what we're able to do is we've got a lot of third-party connectors. So you're able to, if you think about, say, yourself and another colleague had access to, share that same IP, and it was perfectly fine for you guys to work on that together, and that other colleague maybe hands in their notice, and maybe because they've handed in their notice, their behavior changes after that particular point in time. They might start to take that data and do something a little bit different with it. Now, they still have the rights to access it. No one's disputing that they still need access to do their job. But really what it is kind of being able to pull out when something changes in the environment and looking at that user behavior. Has, the person's handed in their notice, has their behavior changed? Are they now taking data and kind of copying it elsewhere? And we're kind of looking at those particular different types of things, and being able to connect it to a third-party HR system, or being able to bring in telemetry from other different systems, and putting all of those pieces of telemetry all together, being able to kind of create that timeline of what's gone on over a period of time. So if you can imagine that user hands in their notice and all of a sudden their behavior has changed over 6 months, being able to bring down that data and kind of copying it to different locations. Maybe they're sharing it via Teams, maybe they're printing it, maybe they're copying it, maybe they're kind of renaming it and saving it and doing different types of things. But when we think about that, and it's not just accidental kind of, pieces as well, but maybe also kind of looking at, what people might not be able to do. So looking at, legal and HR, compliance, looking at being able to take action once a risk has been identified, and kind of being able to do that in advance, because that's kind of one of the top asks, really. There's one other tool when we're thinking about compliance that I kind of wanted to bring on board as well, is our communication compliance. So whereas when we're looking at all the data and all the labels and kind of being able to see from a sensitive information type, those types of things, what types of data is being shared, we also want to look at that conversation thread, and being able to bring those conversations into that whole organization as well, being able to see what it is that that's been going on in that, and kind of looking at that and adding those conversational pieces into that timeline as well. So we've got some customizable templates that you can kind of use those machine learning. So we're looking at a couple of different playbooks. So we've got employee data theft, so kind of that piece where I was talking about what happens when the user hands in their notice. Does their behavior change? We're looking at intentional and unintentional leak of sensitive or confidential information. We're looking at negligent employees and contractors that might bypass security controls, HR policy violations, so things like harassment, discrimination. We're starting to be able to use our machine learning to be able to pick up those intelligent information, and being able to bring all of those pieces to bear as well. And also kind of reporting potential violations as well, so kind of looking at it, being able to assist HR and legal to be able to look at some of those potential insider threats as well, and kind of see what's actually going on in those scenarios and those environments as well. So moving outside of compliance, we have lots of other tools inside our environment, but one of the other ones that I kind of wanted to talk to you about and share really is that cloud services require a slightly different security approach, really. And when you think about it, there are so many applications out there, and some of those applications, they're everywhere. So there isn't going to be many organizations in the world that just use one cloud provider. So you might have, inside your environment, people might use Salesforce, they might use Box, they might have some stuff in Google, they might have some stuff in AWS. They, might be using Twitter, LinkedIn, SAP, all of those different types of things. So from an identity perspective, we really want to centralize that particular piece, so we can actually start to see from a security perspective who's logging into what, but have control over that. But also use tools such as our Cloud App Security, to be able to have a look at what's going on in those environments, and kind of, start to have a look at what applications people are using, and trying to make sure that we have a really good understanding of what people are using in our environment. And there's always going to be an area where some people are using different tools that we don't know about. There's lots of different breaches. Do we really want all of our users to be able to go anywhere, anytime, and go to any particular application and log on? So we really kind of want to have a bit of control over that from a company perspective too. So if we think about that, let's have a look at some of those top use cases for cloud app security. So the first piece really is kind of looking at that shadow IT. So starting to have a look at all of those applications that a customer might have in the environment. So looking at those cloud apps that you might have in your environment. So let's go out there and do a report. Let's have a look at what's actually in use. So the way in which we actually do that is we're able to kind of you can bring in some of your firewall logs. If you're using Defender for Endpoint, we can have a look at the applications that a user's using too. We can look at what authentications from an identity perspective people are actually logging into, and then we can assess if the cloud apps meet those compliance. So inside the Cloud App Security tool, you're actually able to get a very good compliance overview of not only the applications that you're actually looking into, but finding out whether or not those cloud apps that your users are going to, are they GDPR compliant? Do they support, how long do they keep your data for? What types of security do they have, in their environment? Where is their headquarters located? Where is your data being stored? Looking at all of those different types of areas then allows you to be able to work out, whether or not you want those applications to be able to be used by your users. And then you can start to kind of govern and discover those particular apps that we have in the environment. At that particular point, then you can sanction those apps and go, you know what, we're happy for everybody to be able to use Twitter based on the fact that, you've met these minimum requirements. And then we can start to classify and label some of that data that we have in our environment to make sure that we're protecting that data as it leaves our organization and goes to those third-party tools. We need to want to make sure that that sensitive information doesn't leave that environment. So that's kind of being able to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere, being able to track it if you do allow it, and being able to kind of remove that link afterwards as well if you don't want people, if you change your mind afterwards. So therefore that allows us to kind of control and monitor those user sessions in real time as well. So it's giving lots of telemetry as well, and kind of, allowing us that control. And that kind of leads into some of our, our other tools. We can then kind of detect those insider threats. So bringing that telemetry, as I said, into our insider risk management, where is that data going to, where is my IP gone? Kind of being able to bring those threats and that telemetry into the environment and giving you, an overall view of what that looks like. And then we can kind of identify and mitigate, looking at the malware side of things as well. But it's not just on, the cloud side of things. We're looking at what's going on in your corporate environment as well. We're being able to actually see what, where those users are accessing it from their home, and you being able to define it. What if they're on a company VPN? Then yes, we're happy for them to get access to it. But if you're on a different device, then we don't want them to be able to take that IP and being able to move it to different locations. And you can do different things for different internal and external users. We can look at unmanaged devices as well. So it kind of really allows us, to look at it from a multi-mode perspective, giving customers the flexibility on how to implement those core capabilities and those hybrid deployments as well. So kind of, I didn't realize it was going to hadn't built out the rest of that slide. Apologies for that. So our cloud app security, I think we've kind of covered off it, but, it really kind of covers that, being able to control the use of the shadow IT, protecting the information anywhere in the cloud, from a secure access, being able to give them access to any user on any device, but being able to control what it is they can and can't do, being able to protect against those cyber threats, the anonymity, and also kind of like posture management. So looking at it from a security perspective, but also from a compliance perspective, and making sure we're meeting those regulations that we have in our actual environment. So I just wanted to lead into a couple of other slides just before we end off. I think I've got a couple of minutes left. So really what I wanted to kind of, bring to everyone's attention is that about a month ago, or I think it was actually at Ignite, we've released some new security exams, a lot more in line with the conversation that we've actually had today, and kind of, being able to look at those things in a lot more detail. So if we've released a new fundamental exam, so if you've heard of some of our other fundamental exams, we have some for the Microsoft 365 platform, some for AI, some for Azure. We've released one specifically for security, compliance, and identity. So it really kind of covers the three pillars that we've talked a little bit more about today. So it's really a fundamental exam. So things that people that might work in, that want to have those initial conversations around the security. So it's kind of like that fundamental conversation, but giving you an overall picture around what it is that we do. We've got 4 new associate exams as well. So one around security operations analyst. So that is really looking at our SOC, people that will kind of want to work in a security operations center. So looking at really Sentinel in a lot more detail and Defender for endpoints. The SC300 is aligned to our identity and access administrator products. So really looking at the identity in a lot more detail. We have one around information protection as well, so kind of looking at the sensitivity labels, all of those other different types of pieces around how do you protect your data across our platforms. So they're the 4 new exams. They're in beta at the moment, but they should be going live imminently. I believe I think in the next couple of months they'll be actually live, but you are able to sign up and go and do those beta exams. And I think we've got a couple of other resources to share as well. But what I really wanted to do before I kind of handed back over is to talk about our Cloud Accelerator workshops before we handed back over. So our Cloud Accelerator workshops are available for customers. So I think BYTES are going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. But we have quite a lot around our security, compliance, and identity areas. So there is one about secure work from anywhere. So, how what's going on in your environment. So these accelerators are really designed for you to work with a partner, so for you to work with BYTES, to talk to them about what's going on in your environment, for them to run some analysis and some workshops around your live environment, to kind of point out what's going on in your environment, use some of the tools that we've talked about today, so the Azure Security Score, the Compliance Score, looking at some of the other tool sets that we actually have, and kind of helping you kind of move along in your journey. So from an identity perspective, how do we move towards passwordless? How do we move towards, looking at the applications that you might have on premise, from changing their authentication from on-premise into the cloud, and starting to kind of build up maybe a Sentinel standalone environment. How would you go about kind of putting that into your environment, looking at from a hybrid cloud perspective as well. So what have you got on your on-premise environment? How can we help you kind of move those towards, Azure, and kind of looking at it from a security angle as well. There's also lots of stuff around endpoint management. So if you've still got a lot of devices out there, that you're not sure if you've kind of got the compliance, the security angle, have you kind of configured conditional access? Have you configured Intune Manager? How do you know when those devices are connected to your network that they have the right access? So really starting to allow you to work with partners like BYTES to be able to kind of, find out what's going on in your environment, and then the BYTES will be able to help you kind of find a way forward. And just to kind of wrap up, we have a couple of just some slides that kind of I believe you'll be able to take away. So there's lots more slides around learning more on our Microsoft security, our compliance, and our identity tool sets. So thank you all very much for listening to me drone on for the last half an hour or so. I'd like to, I guess, pass it out to questions and polls, and however else we're going to kind of have this next conversation, David.
Thank you very much, Ali, and thanks for covering all of that. I mean, it's a hell of a lot to cover. So thank you for getting through it, and thank you for getting through it in an interesting way, because it is important for all the people out there to see all of it. So we've got a couple of questions. We did have a couple of polls as well. I think just going back to the one about that you referenced earlier, it's very interesting how it was actually quite evenly spread. Although the dominant one was that up sort of 16 to 30% one, there were responses in all areas. So just kind of just to call that out, because I think that was quite interesting. Couple of questions really. First one, Nick, as you're here and you've reappeared. Kind of moving on into the general Q&A just for a second. So like I said, we have got a few questions. What can people actually do with the security score and Azure Secure Score, or the two different Azure scores that you put on? I know we're going to go into more detail on it later in the day, but what can people actually do with it, and how can it benefit them?
Yeah, there's two things on that one then. So looking at Azure Secure Score first, that gives you a list of actions to take or a list of areas to investigate and actions to take around those. So for example, if you don't have multi-factor authentication enabled for your administrators, the first thing will be enable MFA, and then that will give you a secure improvement, say 10 to 15% just by enabling your multi-factor authentication. Next one down, it might be something like you have vulnerabilities that you need to remediate. So you've got a network that doesn't appear to have a firewall on it. You've got a resource that doesn't have anything protecting that resource, whether it's a storage instance or whether it's a server that doesn't have a Azure Defender for servers associated with it. Those are the sorts of things that it will tell you what to do and how to remediate. It will tell you to, again, just you've got that sort of list of things to do and the impact it will have on your score. On the Microsoft 365 side of things, again, it's doing the same thing. You've got a little bit more granularity on there. It will say you can improve your score by enabling MFA for your global admins. It will then tell you the exact impact and the impact on users as well of this, because again, it's more of a productivity tool. So it will be telling you you've got 7 global admins that will be impacted by this, and this is what you should do to prepare them for this change. Again, it's just very actionable to tell you what your secure score is and what actions you can take to improve those, both on the Azure side of things and the Microsoft 365 side of things.
Okay, cool. No, thank you. That's clear. There are a few other questions. What I will just do is draw people's attention to the closing poll, which is what areas you would like to speak to us about, be it different types of workshops and things like that. So if people can be responding to those while we're going on, because that's quite important. Other quick questions. Maybe one for, I'm not sure actually whether it's for you, Ali, or whether it's for you, Nick, but I think it might be one for you, Ali. Do we really need to go E5 to get the benefit of the Microsoft security solution? How much can we do with E3? Was an end user question that's come in.
So I think there's a couple of different things to think about. So when you're talking about Microsoft 365 E5 all up, E5 all up is a completely different thing to just E5 security or E5 compliance, right, Nick? So I think there's a couple of different options that maybe people aren't aware of. So we do have the Microsoft 365 E5 product set, which covers everything in the Microsoft 365 platform, really. So that's kind of, obviously that is the top level SKU, but there is also an E5 security component, which, when you're thinking about from an E3, if you compare the two, really the E3 is kind of, base protection across everything, would you say, Nick? But we're not without the automation piece. So if you really want the automation and you need the automation to respond to those threats that are coming in, the automatic pieces around it, that really does lead you to the E5 security license SKU. Would you say, Nick? You could probably explain it more elegantly than me.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the right way to explain it. I always say if you want the intelligence, if you want to bring in intelligence and automation into things, then it's the E5. So to give you a concrete example, with EMS E3, for example, you get rules-based conditional access. So you can go and say, if someone's coming from this network, do this. If someone's coming from this device, do this. If their device doesn't meet this standard, do this. With E5, it adds identity protection to say, actually evaluate all that stuff and tell me if the risk is low, medium, or high. And if it's a low, medium, or high risk, do this. So instead of having the full suite of rules, you've got intelligence and machine learning behind it to tell you this is a low risk, medium risk, or high risk. And again, it's the same with Defender for Office 365. It's the same with Defender for endpoints in certain ways. It's when you want that intelligence and continuous service, that's when you're looking more at the E5 side of things.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that, Nick. Next one. What type of things, one for you, this one, Ali, what type of things might I learn about my environment if I booked a Cloud Accelerator workshop?
So as I showed before, there is quite a lot of different Cloud Accelerator workshops that you can actually look to do. So if we take, say, the identity one, for instance, the identity one would allow you to really just kind of look at the environment. So So what you would learn is that you would start the workshop with a bit of an overview. What is identity? So BYTES would take you through, a little bit more in depth around, what is identity? How can we kind of look to help that in your environment? So looking at that identity and access management piece. And then we kind of start to go, well, have you enabled self-service password reset? If not, let's create a path to be able to kind of, enable that self-service password. Have we enabled multi-factor authentication in your environment? environment. No, okay, let's go and have a look and find a way to be able to enable multi-factor authentication in the environment. What about all the applications that we actually authenticate to with on-premise Active Directory? Could we look to move that authentication into Azure AD? And there's some great benefits of being able to do that, is that you can then control all of those logons, the users kind of moving towards a single plane for a single sign-on perspective. They're not having that multiple authentication piece from an on-premise perspective. Then you're able to control it from a security perspective, and we're able to start to apply some of those conditional access policies that Nick talked about as well, and being able to apply those to those particular on-premise applications, but also then being able to kind of look at those cloud applications that we're actually being able to do and say, instead of having a separate identity for those, can we integrate those with Azure AD as well? So starting to bring that whole identity piece and kind of that whole one portal that we talked about in the beginning is kind of, being able to kind of join all of those pieces up together. And so what the workshops really do is have a look at it from your perspective, not just, what could you do, but having a look at your environment, what have you implemented, what haven't you, and giving you guys a way forward. And BYTES can help you with that, drive that whole piece forward and drive that transformation in your environment to be able to achieve some of those goals.
Cool. Thanks, Ali. I've got one last question that the audience has posed. It's a really good one, and I think it is a really good one for you guys to go through, because it is an often flagged point, which is, what is your view on it all being eggs in one basket with one vendor for security, and how would you respond to that? I
guess you're leaving that one for me, are you, Ali?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, go for it. Well, you chime in, please. But yeah, agreed. It is. Again, it comes all the way back to where we started from, which is this idea of having a strategic approach for your security. It is what we've seen is, this idea of bolting on and going best of breed, and you end up with a stack, and that stack needs integration. That stack needs something to automate it. Yes, you can use a SIEM. Yes, you can use a SOAR. You have to try and do that. You have to try and pull all that together. You are responsible for that integration. What Microsoft are providing you instead is, yes, I see the argument about all eggs in one basket. I would say that that basket, to really torture an analogy, is that basket is locked in a bunker. It has some of the world's best defenders looking after it. It is proactively maintained. It's proactively managed. It's proactive. Use the proactively as much as you want to. I realise that the phrase AI is particularly nauseous when talking about security to some people. So I'll say machine learning, statistics, heuristics. The fact that your basket is one of a load of other baskets that are being protected. The fact that we see 8 trillion signals associated with those particular baskets that we're looking after, and use machine learning to run over to discover when something net new or untoward is happening across there. The fact there's nearly 4,000 employees who are dedicated to security looking after that particular basket. For me, it's a real question back though. Do you want to go best of breed, or do you want to take advantage of a security strategy that gives you the superpowers of intelligence, integration, and automation? And for me, that it is a balance, and I can't answer it for you, but you know who I work for, you know the choice, why I'm here. Again, actually, David, I think it'd be interesting to see your thoughts on that as well, if you fancy chiming in.
Oof, put me on the spot, Nick. Put me on the spot. I mean, I think the reality is, for me, the thing I found very refreshing about Microsoft over recent times is the honesty. And Microsoft don't try and pretend that they secure everything. For instance, Microsoft don't make a piece of firewall technology for you to deploy on-premise as your on-premise or data center firewall solution. They make security solutions for the areas that they choose to make security solutions. So it's I'm not going to try and torture the basket analogy any further, but actually Microsoft are very honest and forthright about the things that they can't do. And if you have a workload that Microsoft can't secure, then you do have to look at a third-party solution, or an alternative vendor. And that's important. And do you know what? It might be that tactically, if you have to use an additional vendor in one particular area, maybe it makes sense to use it in another vendor in another area. But let's be clear, one of the tools that Microsoft is giving you is the ability to minimize the number of vendors you're using with a very high quality security stack. It doesn't mean that they can do everything. That isn't what's being claimed. It is what's being claimed by some companies. It isn't what Microsoft are claiming. I think that's fair, isn't it, Nick? Oh, you've gone on mute. Yeah, everything's gone quiet. But yeah, that's certainly how I view it. There's obviously some background noise, I'm guessing, at Nick's end. There we go. So you know, that's very important. So that's certainly how I would view that. You know, we're not saying use them for everything. Use them for the things that they're good at. And you know, don't try and shoehorn it in. Have we got any more questions? I don't think we have. I think one thing I just wanted to particularly call out, which is I think an area to both Microsoft and BYTES on top of what we've covered, is Sentinel. We've got a lot of our customer database that is interested in, if I can even speak properly, interested in Sentinel. And what we have done to enable businesses to deploy Sentinel in the best possible way is that we in BYTES have worked very hard to make sure that we have a managed service available for Sentinel now. So as well as all the benefits that Sentinel brings as being baked into the ecosystem and a good product in its own right, you know, we now have the ability to add managed service. And as part of that, obviously, we can onboard not only the third-party vendors into Sentinel that Microsoft can natively support, but we also can ensure that we can bring in basically any third-party vendor that you want to bring into that managed service, which I think is very important. So that really, for me, lends weight to the Sentinel argument and the Sentinel debate. I think it is a good piece of technology, and I think I only have to look at the number of customers that, you know, in any random call that we're doing, they go, "You're not doing anything with Sentinel, by the way, are you?" And you go, "Oh, actually, yes, we are." So I think that's very, very important, and it is a good piece of technology. You know, for us, we have, I've just used the word plethora, but a wide range of high quality resources to engage with our customer database and our prospect database around all the things that Nick and Ali have been talking about. They are there to support the account managers. We have a whole team of product specialists, and then we have a genuine pre-sales technical team behind that, as well as a delivery team. So we have the ability to deliver on everything we've been talking about today, which I think is very important. And it's an exciting time to be working with Microsoft in security. So I think we'll give everybody what all of it is 4 minutes back on their session. I don't think I've missed anything. The marketing department will generally shout at me, but survey, customer survey. That's the bit I nearly forgot about. So guys, if you please can respond to the survey, there is the incentive of the £100 prize draw if you respond and if you're drawn out. So that would be absolutely fantastic. I think we've tackled all the questions. So I think we're all good to go for this session. So Ali and Nick, thank you very much for your time. It's been really illuminating and really helpful. I think it's been a real good check-in for all of our customers on just what Microsoft security means now. So thank you very much. We'll wrap up and leave everybody to grab some lunch before this afternoon's sessions.
Thank you.
Thanks all.